Hello, everyone. My name's Esti Garrity, and I serve as the Chief Medical Officer at Esri. And I am joined by my colleague, Mike Scholin, who is one of our senior solution engineers on the Health and Human Services team. Now, together, we're really looking forward to sharing this information with you on the 3 must-use GIS tools for pandemic response and actually beyond for other things. So for this video recording, we're going to assume that you know that GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems and that it's a technology system that makes sense of geographic data. Now, of course, the premier GIS system in the world is Arcgis, which is built by Esri, the company that Mike and I work for. So it makes sense that you're finding this on our website. But I did want to make this disclosure because I also wanted to tell you that most of your organizations probably already have several Arcgis licenses available. So what we want to do today is share with you what we noticed has become a very clear pattern for health organizations around the world, actually, and it focuses on 3 really easy to use tools. And so here's how we're going to approach this. I'm going to start with a brief introduction to GIS and actually Web GIS as well. And I'm going to share a little bit about the pattern that we've observed with these 3 specific tools during pandemic response. And then Mike and I are going to kind of tag team back and forth and show you step by step how you can configure the tools for a specific use case that today is going to be around vaccine hesitancy. And we're going to end by identifying some other possible use cases to spark your imagination and help your departments with multiple different kinds of initiatives. And then Mike and I, of course, have some resources to help you get hands-on with these tools and do some of this yourself. And of course, we'll also provide the PDF of these slides so that you have quick and easy access to those links on the resources slide. Now, you have probably noticed that mapped information has really been front and center during the pandemic. I mean, you could certainly make the argument that GIS has never been more important than it is now. And I've said this before, but it really does make sense when you think about the roots of GIS. This is a technology that's based on geography. And of course, geography is one of the preeminent sciences of our world. And it really brings data together with relevant context in a way that helps us visually and intuitively to more easily see and digest complexity and relationships and patterns in our data. And it helps us to understand, and it helps us to intelligently respond. And of course, intelligent response has been critical as we all work together to fight this global pandemic. So one of the things that I think has really helped organizations around the world respond in that intelligent way is their ability to quickly adopt Web GIS patterns in their work. Now, some, of course, have already been doing this. Maybe you guys have. But for a lot of organizations, this idea of Web GIS was something kind of new. And it became really popular. And I think that's because it's pretty easy to use. It's quick to configure. In other words, whenever we say configure, what we mean is that you don't need a developer to just be able to get started and get going. With WebGIS, you can interconnect all of your tools and your data and make changes to those things as the situation evolves. And of course, that's another important criterion when you are facing an ongoing crisis. And of course, WebGIS enables sharing and collaboration on multiple levels, whether you're really more interested in sharing internal to your organization with a few stakeholders, or you want to share in a distributed way across collaborating organizations, or even open sharing with the public. All of those things are possible. So what exactly is this WebGIS idea? And many of you are probably very familiar with desktop GIS programs like ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. Now, these tools are great. They're super powerful in their capabilities, especially when we think about analytics, and I know that appeals to a lot of you. Now, Web GIS is that other stuff. It's the apps and the APIs that work in this enterprise environment, whether that's or in an enterprise in your system or in ArcGIS Online. So what I mean to say is it works in a collaborative, multi-user environment. And my overall takeaway from this slide is that WebGIS is really all about connectivity, connecting your tools. And with WebGIS, you get this interconnected data and systems of all types. And it's all happening at the same time. And when you have that situation, when you're able to do that, you're really able to create responsive organizations. And that interconnectedness that I'm talking about is really enhanced by the fact that ArcGIS, by design, is an open platform. So what do we mean by open platform? It means that it can be flexible, it can be extended in a number of different ways, and it's customizable, actually. It's interoperable using various different standards and direct engineering technologies to make things work together. Now, it's also customizable in the sense that people can extend it with rich tools like Python or integrate in open source tools like TensorFlow to build really complex, intricate systems. And the success of this strategy, I think, is pretty strong. It's evidenced by thousands and actually tens of thousands of heterogeneous systems that have been implemented using and powered by this platform. Now at Esri, we have been talking about WebGIS, open platform tools, and interoperability for quite a few years now, but I would say in health, these concepts became so much more prevalent, so much more popular during COVID-19. So you might ask, why is that, beyond the fact that this is a global crisis? And I think that part of it can be attributed to the popularity of the Johns Hopkins University COVID-19 dashboard. I talk about this dashboard a lot because I think it's really important in the way that it's changed our world. It really made this idea of WebGIS explode on a global level. It was initially created just over a few hours by a graduate student one evening in January of 2020. And actually, when you compare what you're seeing on screen to the original, you would realize that while a bunch of the cartography is similar and you feel like it's the same map, it's evolved quite a bit, and it's been modified several times, like when they added in the US counties to the reporting. The good news is that the technology allowed Johns Hopkins University to adapt the dashboard as they went along and had new ideas and new data that they wanted to share. Now, this dashboard really brought worldwide attention to the value of map-based information for health. And furthermore, because Johns Hopkins decided to make their data open and publicly available, governments and organizations could simply use that data for their locale. They could take a few hours and configure their own dashboard to suit their local situational awareness needs. And I don't know if you were aware, but this dashboard is the most viral map-based application in the history of the world, with over 2 trillion views since the beginning of the pandemic. Hosting something like that? It could be expensive if you had to do it on your own, but when you're doing it in the cloud and you're using Esri's infrastructure, you are automatically covered. Now, inspired by the JHU dashboard, literally thousands of other localized dashboards have popped up. They've been created sharing indicators and metrics related to the pandemic in various formats and colors. They've been exciting to watch. And actually, the next thing we saw happen was this desire to pull information together about COVID in one place. And so people started to put their dashboards into hub sites, and they added additional information, graphics, narrative, and data, and local resources to provide that context for their residents, their local stakeholders who needed to know. And sometimes, I'm sure many of you are aware, the data that was needed to make some sort of a decision simply didn't exist yet. And so we saw our mobile survey tools put to use to collect data on vaccine inventory and supplies, on grocery store inventory, looking at employee status, and even registration forms for receiving the vaccine. The uses for fast data collection really blossomed through local needs, mother of invention, and subsequent innovation. So today, Mike and I really want to show you how this powerful combination of Survey 123 plus Arcgis Dashboards plus Arcgis Hub works. And so we're seeing this grouping of these three products used over and over again for COVID-19 and for many other health challenges. So let's dig in deeper, and we're going to begin with this data collection piece, because of course we always seem to want and need more and more data, whether we're looking for something more specific or more localized, more fine scale. We always need more data. And I think finally that's become a little bit easier to collect. The technology investments that have happened in mobile data collection have really escalated over the last, I'd say, 6 to 8 years. And Esri offers a number of field apps in ArcGIS that increase efficiency across all types of field activities, from modernizing and streamlining data collection to enabling all kinds of fieldwork assignments. And of course, each app includes the location intelligence perspective. So for the workshop today, we're going to focus on the most popular data collection tool for health organizations, and that is Survey 123, which can be used in a browser or on a tablet or on a mobile phone. Now, before we get into those details of Survey 123, let's look at some of the benefits of digital data capture if you haven't already made the switch. So the entire data management and collection process really is made easier in the digital world, because data can be collected and then submitted in real time. And that allows managers to see things like the pace of data collection. How's it going? The geographic coverage of that collection, and also which of their volunteers or data collectors are submitting their data and with what regularity. There's no more manual data entry from your collection form to your database system. When you have digital data collection, because it's entered automatically when you submit a form, the data can start to be analyzed and reviewed immediately. I think it's also likely that your data is going to be more accurate, since a good form designer can apply all sorts of domain value lists or response ranges, or even include smart logic on questions so that answers that don't make any sense just aren't allowed to be input. Operating costs could be reduced because mobile data collection reduces costs that are associated with form printing, with that double data entry and data cleaning. And I would say it's also likely to be more efficient for environmental, health, and safety compliance reporting requirements. So there's a lot of benefits. If you haven't switched over, it might be time. Now, with that background, let's dive into Survey 123 as an application. And for the purposes of this workshop, we wanted to build out these tools to demonstrate to you using a very current use case, and that is addressing vaccine hesitancy. Now, a trend that we've been seeing in the last several months to get at that idea of vaccine confidence is surveying various populations for their intent to be vaccinated with one of the COVID-19 vaccines. So let me give you a few examples. In Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, they surveyed their own government workers, and they analyzed vaccine intent by job function. And the results were very interesting. Police and fire are more hesitant than public health, right? That makes some sense, probably. And then there's the community partnership, which is a continuum of care supporting people who are experiencing homelessness in the Washington, D.C. area. Now, they wanted to survey their homeless community to better understand attitudes and beliefs around the COVID vaccines. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to show you how you can quickly build a survey to understand vaccine intent.
Great. Thank you, Esti. So to get started, we're actually going to sign into ArcGIS Online by just navigating to your organization's homepage and signing in. So let's go ahead and log in here and put in some credentials and sign in. Now, once you're inside of ArcGIS, there are a few ways to launch Survey123, but the simplest method is just by clicking the app in the app launcher at the top corner of the screen. Now, if you're not seeing the Survey123 button here, there could be a few reasons for that. It's typically that you haven't been allocated access to that tool. So just contact your administrator, and typically that can be resolved very quickly. Once you launch Survey123, you might potentially see a whole host of content from different members of your organization. These are surveys that are owned by others that you might only have read-only access to because they've decided to share it either to a group or to the public. So this is really a great place to explore the work of others in your organization and even get links to existing surveys that they've published. But today we're going to be creating a new survey from scratch. And so we're going to hit that new survey button. And here is where we're prompted with our first design choice. The web designer, which is what we're going to be using in this session, it's a very simple drag and drop experience. A very simple logic can be added, and there are support for dozens of different question types, and even some basic cascading logic, like Esti mentioned. Now, if you wanted more complex logic, things like auto-populating questions and maybe referencing external pieces of content, that's when you can use Survey123 Connect, which actually opens up on your desktop for editing. The Connect version, again, a little bit more advanced, it supports multiple languages at the same time. So that allows users to potentially toggle to the best translation for them to respond to the questionnaire. It's also very easy to get started with. And there's some other sessions on our site like Esri 360 where you can watch this tool in action. But today we're going to get started just with a blank survey. We're going to give it a name. And it's important to choose a name here that is meaningful because all of your folders and services that are created later, they have the same moniker associated with them. So make sure you save or put in a good name here. We're going to add in a couple of tags to make the content easier to find. And we're going to add in a summary so that my coworkers know exactly what I've created here and what the survey's use case is. Once you hit create here, it's going to take a quick second behind the scenes. And that's because it's building out all of the folders and services where all of the data gets stored. That's a lot of structure. And we'll look at the behind the scenes in just a moment. But as you can see here, in just a few clicks, we're already on the designer page. So let's get started with some basic question types. I could add in a single line text question. This is a really great place for someone to put in their name if they're responding, or if you have a community worker in the field that can collect someone else's name. You can add in drop down lists and give them additional question names as well. And now we can start to even add in some of these choices. And there's a few ways of doing this. With multiple choices, you can click the plus button or modify these lists very manually. Or if you have existing lists, say you have another survey that you've created or you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can copy and paste in those lists into the batch edit mode, and then it will just populate everything in there as an option. So there's some very quick ways of taking your existing content and putting it into Survey123 very quickly. You also have this new choice to randomize these options every time the survey loads. So if you want to make sure people aren't just clicking the first response every single time, that's a great way to enforce that rule there. There's other question types that can be added, things like ratings, multiple choice. You can even collect things like signatures and email addresses. All of these different question types, again, with that very easy drag and drop experience. Now, when it comes to structuring your content, you can even group questions together into these little windows or pages. So we can drag these together. You could have the group be collapsed by default to conserve some page space. But at the end of the day, it really does keep your thought process together as you're moving down the page here. Now, my favorite capability in Survey123, again, like Esti mentioned, is that cascading logic. For example, if you're a respondent and you're told to complete a 20-question form with some questions that are highly irrelevant to you, you might not answer the survey, or you might just click an answer because it told you to click an answer. You don't want to do that. So Survey 123 is going to allow us to only show questions when certain conditions are met. So for example, in this use case, we're going to be gauging individuals' intent related to the COVID-19 vaccine. So we want to just have them select on the scale if they disagree or strongly agree with getting vaccinated. And now I can even add in a multi-line text question. So only if they answered negatively to the Likert question, I want them to explain their reasoning. So let's go ahead and put some better text in there. And now we're going to set a rule for the Likert question. So we'll click on here and click set rule. And all I want them to do is if they strongly disagree with the Likert question, I want them to show me that explaining box below. Likewise, if they disagree, or even if they're neutral, I'm interested in capturing their feedback. Let's go ahead and hit plus there. Now we can see this survey actually in action. So I've baked this one out a little bit more, but as we scroll down the page, you can see here that if someone absolutely will get the COVID-19 vaccine, there's no further action required. But if they click lower, say they're unsure, that's when we start collecting that feedback for the survey, and I'm prompted to add a little bit more information. Now we'll see in a moment again how we can use more of this data, but let's go ahead and share this survey with our target audience. So we're going to click on the Collaborate tab within Survey 123, and now we can set who can share the survey to, so who can submit data into this system. So potentially that could be everyone in the public. And we can even set who can see the results of the survey. Right now, this is just me. Pretty much everything in ArcGIS when it's created is just shared to you as an individual, but I could share it to a group of people. So it could be a group of researchers or my community health workers. It could be everyone within ArcGIS who's has a login to my organization. Or again, if this was a very non-sensitive survey collection, you could share the results to everyone potentially. And the use cases for that are pretty limited. Now we will come back in a moment and see how we can use this data in other ways, but for now, I'll send it back over to you, Esty.
Thanks, Mike. All right, well, I hope that you could see really clearly how easy it is to configure your own surveys. I have to tell you that when I first opened up this tool, I had this idea that I had a survey that I wanted to create, and I had no instruction at all, but I've watched enough of our Esri demos to know it looks pretty easy. But I did find the interface to be pretty intuitive, and now I can create my own surveys in a snap. So just want to encourage you that it really is just about as easy as it looks. So let's move on to making decisions. That's obviously the reason that we collect all of that data. We need to be able to understand what's going on in a pretty comprehensive way. We want to be able to make data-driven decisions, and we'd like to be able to do that pretty quickly. So ArcGIS dashboards can help us really do all of these things in an engaging, interactive, and structured way. So I want to just say a brief word about dashboards. There are several different types of dashboards. I think it's useful to really understand what they are, what they might mean. Dashboards can be strategic, tactical, operational, or informational. And probably, like me, you've seen some of each of these related to COVID-19 over the past year plus. I think what you're seeing on screen is really a great example. It comes from the state of Nebraska, and it's about their vaccine distribution efforts. Now, their dashboard has several tabs, and so I'm able to show you lots of information here. In their overview dashboard in the upper left, you're seeing the strategic part of their dashboard, right? This has got their key performance indicators about their ability to administer the doses of vaccine that they received, as well as their overall adult population that has been vaccinated. That second dashboard page in the upper right is actually very tactical. They're looking at the daily doses distributed. And I think this is really a great visual to be able to see how well they've been ramping up their process at this early point in the vaccination objective that we have. The next two tabs in their dashboard across the bottom are both operational and informational, and they're sharing stats on distribution by demographic group and by geography. And so for the demonstration, we want to continue on this same track, this same line of thinking about vaccine intent. And so Mike's going to show you how you can configure a dashboard from that Survey 123 data that was collected in the last step. So continue the process, and off to you, Mike.
Great, thank you. So, like I mentioned earlier, all of our data is being stored in this secure and easily accessible place. So let's dive in and explore that now. What you should know is that there are a few ways of getting to the data within Survey 123. And the first is actually directly within the application interface. So by clicking that Analyze tab, we can visualize the responses in a series of pre-generated charts and tables. No work has to be done here. You can just grab this report and go, and many people do. You can even on the fly change these chart types to visualize the information in different ways. Now, one of my favorite ways to visualize information is down here at the bottom, and this is with the free text responses, where it can even generate a word cloud. So this is a very interesting way of exploring some common themes in free text responses. And all of this data can very easily be downloaded from the Data tab into a variety of formats: Excel, shapefile, CSV, KML files. All of the classics that we might need to output our data into. But as you probably guessed from the session title, we want to build a dynamic dashboard from this data. And for example, that will allow our community partners to find pockets in the community where they have the best shots at intervention. So let's go ahead and build that out. Going back into the homepage of our organization, we're going to locate the source data for our survey. And again, this is where all of the responses for our data get stored. So we click on that content folder, and here we see that new folder that got created with our survey, and it's filled with all of the content that we gave that thoughtful name to at the very beginning. And now this is usually where people get hung up, and let's go into my fully baked survey that has a little bit more content in it. It's which of these items should I be using for my dashboard? Well, there's the form item, which is the form we just created. If you try to open this, it will actually take you back to the designer from earlier, or you could launch the survey itself in this page and use it to collect responses. So a great way to get the URL for your survey is right there. There's also hosted layers and hosted views. Now, hosted layers, this is your source data. This is where everything gets put in. It's 100% of the content of the survey. But let's say you wanted to take a subset of that data for public transparency. Maybe you wanted to strip out any personally identifiable information and just share out some more generic survey content. That's what views are. Views are subsets of that data that just have maybe permissions turned off. So maybe the public shouldn't be able to edit the data set, or they shouldn't be able to see the name column of a field. Views are going to be very important when you're building out secondary content from surveys. So for our dashboard, we want to use the layer that's marked as this public layer. So let's go ahead and click on that and add it to a new map. Now, there is so much that can be done with these maps, but we're going to keep it very simple today. We're going to zoom into Washington, D.C., which is where our survey samples were collected from. Click on the Symbology tab. And then very quickly here, we see the option to create a new heat map. And then just in a few clicks, it's done. Now, for the design for the dashboard that I have in my head, I want to keep it a darker theme. So let's go ahead here, click on Base Map, and we see all of the different base map options that ArcGIS users have access to, including this one called Dark Gray Canvas, which I want to use for my responses. Now we can even add in additional operational and reference layers to have on our dashboard. So we can click on the Add button and browse the ArcGIS Living Atlas, which is the world's largest geospatial repository. All of this really free data for users to take advantage of within ArcGIS, and search for layers like weather. That's an important layer potentially to have on a map for our community users to see if there's any weather watches in the area as they're performing outreach. That's a good layer. We can also search for layers directly from the CDC, like the social, like the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. That's something you can get directly within ArcGIS and add it as a reference layer to your map. So keep that in mind that it doesn't just have to be your survey data. It can be all of this wide range of data that can be layered together for more enhanced awareness of what's going on. But again, we could do so much here on this map, but we want to keep it simple. Let's go ahead and save our map. We're going to give it a name. We're going to give it some tags so we can locate the content later. And like always, we're going to give it a great description so our coworkers know what we've been up to. Put it in the right folder and hit save. Great. And now that we've clicked save, we have the option to share the map out into an application. Now, dashboards are just one of the dozens of types of configurable apps you can build in ArcGIS. And notice I said configurable. At no point in any of these applications are you required to write any code. But in this case, again, we're going to keep it simple and we're going to build out a dashboard. And we're going to give it a summary, put it in the right folder, and hit done. So automatically what's going to happen is it's going to take our map and it's going to be added to the dashboard builder. And this is where we can start building what are called widgets. These are those data-driven graphs and numbers and lists that you see on all of these great dashboards. But I do like to take a quick pause here. It's so easy to go overboard with these dashboards because it's so easy to build. So before you really dive in, it's great to take a quick pause here and set some kind of question that you're trying to answer. What I like to do is write it on a Post-it note and stick it to your screen as a reminder. Otherwise, people who are interacting with the app, they tend to get lost. So my goal here is to build something for my local partners to use as a communication strategy to understand which communities have a low vaccine intent. So with that in mind, let's start with something very simple. I just want to see the total number of responses that we've collected. So I'm going to click that plus button at the top of the screen. We're going to click the indicator widget. And then I'm selecting which layer is going to hydrate or power that particular widget. And in this case, it's actually my layer from my map. And I can click that, and by default, this widget does exactly what I want it to. It's summarizing the total count of responses within the survey data. I could also set it to some kind of value from the table if we were collecting a numeric response. But in this case, we were just simply collecting the total count of responses. Now, I do want to clean this indicator up. I remember back when I worked in biosurveillance, we like to format our end values by putting a parenthesis, an N, and an equal sign, and a closed parenthesis. So you can very easily see how you can wrap these calculations around rich text content to really add some great context to the value. And also, I want to remove the last update text from the bottom corner of the widget. That's because we're looking at data that may have been collected last week. I don't need to know if it's up to the second data collection on these surveys. And then I hit done, and instantly my first widget is complete. Now let's add in a chart to potentially filter our content based upon the data. So again, we're going to hit the plus button, and this time we're going to select the serial chart option. And we're going to pick which data we want to reference. Serial charts, not just in ArcGIS, but really in general, they can get very complex. You can have multiple series of data. You can make line charts, bar charts, really a whole bunch of options are available here. But we want to keep it simple. So we're going to select a simple bar chart is what we're going to create, just highlighting our vaccine intent. So for our category field, we're going to go to that question related to vaccine intent. And again, very quickly, this is pretty close to what I want the option to look like. But we see that they're slightly out of order here at the bottom of the screen. And so we want to sort our options. And in this case, it does it by text. So everything's in order the way I would like it to be. You can also sort by a statistic if you wanted least to most or most to least. So that's an option here as well. You can also set the colors for just about everything in ArcGIS. Including ArcGIS dashboards. So you can pick from some very basic colors for our series colors, or you could enter in a hex code for color. What that means is that you can make this dashboard look 100% native to your existing website. So if you have a color picker extension like I do, you can choose and pick the colors from your existing website. Or if your organization or agency, if you have a branding guide that you have to follow, that's a great place to apply those branding colors to applications like this. So now for this use case here, let's go back to my chart and let's put these back into the right order. There we go. That's the right order there. What I would like to do is be able to select not likely or unsure and have that filter the remainder of my dashboard. I'm really only looking for those who are in this middle group that could potentially be influenced to go get the vaccine. And that's where actions come into play. With actions, we want to be able to select multiple categories. So I want to be able to select one or more of these different sections. And then when a user makes that selection, I want to filter our map and I want to filter the indicator that we created and click done. Now, watch what happens, and let's zoom over to Washington, D.C. here again. When I collect or select these different options here for these survey responses, it's done two things. It's filtered the indicator widget, and it's also filtered the map. So keep that in mind that it can really filter across multiple different pages or multiple different sections of these dashboards. These cards can also be very easily reordered to fit the right sizing on the screen. There we go. At this point, I also do recommend saving, and that's because we're working entirely within a web browser here. So, if your internet connection went out, you might lose some of your work. So saving often is a pretty good thing to do here. Now, fitting with our theme, I do want to make this page just a little bit darker. So I can click the settings icon and change our dashboard to this dark theme. Now, I did spend about an extra hour adding some more widgets, and I was able to create this dashboard. And again, you can see here that I've used some colors from an agency's branding guide. So as I select these different icons, it filters the map, it filters all of these other widgets, and I've even shrunk down our indicator widget to be a little bit smaller at the top of the screen here. Now I also set another action, so when I zoom in on the map, it filters the free response feedback. This is using a list widget. So now I can see here in a particular region, which groups had some commonalities in their themes for their free response text. So I have some things for my community workers to potentially address in these regions. I'm also able to look at some other layers they've added to my map. In this case, there's layers from HRSA on federally qualified health centers. This could even be a layer from from another local government on resources for vaccine outreach. So some really great context added here. There's that weather layer I could add in. And here's actually a layer from one of my colleagues where she's generated a list of communities that may be at a risk for high vaccine hesitancy. A really great way of showing how someone can work on a desktop component, share their analysis to the web, and then here we're operationalizing it within a dashboard. So taking a step back from the technology, I love doing this. If I now look at the results of my kind of this movable middle of individuals, I can see that and again, this is a sample data set, have a large female, non-Hispanic, white population across a wide range of age brackets in this region with some survey responses that I can potentially address to increase our vaccine intent within this area. So about an hour of work to create this dynamic dashboard that's very, very helpful in identifying regions where community partnerships might be the most successful. Thank you, Esty.
Thanks, Mike. So only one correction. If you're a beginner at this, it takes about an hour and 15 minutes. And I'm really actually kind of proud to say that it was just a few weeks ago that I made my very first dashboard. And there's a lot of different things that you can do, but walking through a tutorial style lesson, which we'll show you at the end, really did make it easy. And I could do it almost as quickly as Mike. So again, I just want to relay that that configurable tools really do kind of enable everybody, even a non-technologist. So, but you need a place so you can store and share your dashboard. Where are you going to put it? Maybe you want to add some additional narrative so that you can put it into context with some other graphics and photos and videos, because you want to be able to ensure that your viewers can interpret the data in the way that you intend, right? To get your message really clear and straight. And maybe you also want to include other applications in the same space so you can further engage with your community. Well, ArcGIS Hub is really a great solution for this because it's easy to configure, it's cloud-based, and it organizes people and data and tools to really help you so you can accomplish whatever are your initiatives, your goals, your mission. It's all there for you. So what exactly is ArcGIS Hub? Well, this is like a website, but in one way that's different from a website, it's super easy to stand up. So maybe by now, when I keep saying it's really easy, you can trust me. You do have to learn how to do it, but they're not hard. So the key message here, again and again, there's no coding required. So just like Survey123 and Arcgis dashboards, you can get your work done quickly because of this configurable opportunity that you have here. You can share open data. You can create actually unlimited websites. You can organize around initiatives. Maybe your initiative, excuse me, is COVID-19, or maybe it's really more specific. It's COVID-19 vaccination. Well, ArcGIS Hub enables collaboration as well so that you can share, and I mentioned this before, you can share with your staff, with external community members, or some combination of both. You can make your hub site interactive by including apps and other ways to engage and move your community members to action, to rally around a goal in a very focused way that you can kind of drive and determine. And again, because ArcGIS Hub works with your other ArcGIS tools, you can really benefit from a full system rather than having to kind of piece together a bunch of other tools and systems, which is a bit less convenient. So importantly, when we're continuing our story around vaccine intent and vaccine hesitancy, I think it's worth knowing that ArcGIS Hub is supported in dozens of languages. And if you are someone in IT or informatics, think of this, and I did sort of mention this before, but in this time of high volumes of traffic to your websites due to the thirst for information around COVID vaccines or any of these other topics, you really can benefit from ArcGIS Hub because it offloads the traffic from your infrastructure and it puts the burden on ours. And we're set up to handle that. So let's see one more time. How easy, maybe I'm overusing that word, but how logical maybe it can be to use the coronavirus vaccine distribution hub solution. There's a mouthful for you.
Great, thanks, Esty. And I really do think it is so easy, and it's actually about to get even easier because we're about to, do all of this work with a solution, which, in one click is going to build out a whole bunch of content for us. So that's a really great segue. So to build out those dynamic web pages, again, we're going to return to the home page of our ArcGIS online organization. Again, just like before, we're going to open up the app launcher, but this time we're going to click the hub icon. Now, like before, there's some permissions involved behind the scenes. So if you don't see this button, just contact your administrator, and it's usually a thing that they can toggle on for you. So like with Survey123, I'm going to be able to come into here and see all of the other hub websites or initiatives that were created by members of my organization, again, that they've decided to share either to the organization or publicly. So a really great, timeout moment. You can build out these sites not just to be public facing, a great application, but they could actually just be a landing page for internal members of your organization as well. So something to keep in mind. But we do, again, want to just start from scratch here and build out a new initiative. Now, I could create a new initiative entirely from scratch. Imagine launching Microsoft Word as a blank page. You really have to get running to build out what you want it to be. Or you could use a template. Imagine using a resume template inside of Microsoft Word, how fast that gets you started. So we want to click these templates, and you can see all of the different things that our solutions and hub team have developed to really get you moving quickly. There's things for citizen problem reporters where citizens can report potholes and community blight. Those are the types of things you can collect here. Business recovery, all of these different models. But in this case, if you guessed from the session title, we're interested in COVID-19. So that's why they've developed this coronavirus vaccine outreach template, which we're going to leverage during this example. So we'll click activate. And just like before, we're going to give it a name and hit go. And that's going to go ahead and start spinning up this website for us. Now, I should mention that with ArcGIS Hub Premium, you do have the option to have custom domains. So if you have a domain name or a website URL already, you can leverage that here. Now, this does take about a minute to build everything out because it's building out all of the framework for a website, which if you've developed a site before, you know that can be quite a good bit of content, but it's taken care of for us behind the scenes here. But while that's loading, I do want to talk about Esri's commitment to accessibility. And this is so critical to make sure, especially with health resources, that everyone has equal access to the content. And that's a wide range of different accessibility factors. It's not just for sighted and non-sighted users. That's a major thing for especially 508 compliance. But considering things like cognitive disabilities, auditory disabilities, the ability for people to filter content using their screen readers and tools like that. These are things that we're ensuring our platform is compliant with, so everyone has access to this content. Another important thing to mention at this point is that ArcGIS Hub is supported in dozens of languages, which is a big factor in health equity as well. That's going to ensure that as you're building out these products, everyone can take advantage of them. Again, that's a huge factor for accessibility to health-related materials. Now, ArcGIS Hub does have an auto translate function, which is based on a Google tool. It's the same, I think, that is built into Google Chrome. But if you want the best translation, really the one to make sure that everyone can understand it, it's best to have someone who speaks the language enter that in manually as like a separate page. So what we're going to see here is what we're going to get with the solution that was deployed. It comes with all of this rich content, which can be edited, reordered, or even removed. It also comes with a few applications. Let me scroll down to the bottom of the screen here. Am I eligible? This is an application for people to determine if they're eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine. So if I click on some of these options, am I a healthcare worker? Yes, I'm eligible. Obviously, with the news recently, this is changing very rapidly. And like Essie mentioned with dashboards and Server 123, this can be altered on the fly as well to stay up to date. There's other applications involved here, like I got vaccinated for individuals to share their vaccination story. All of this rich content just deployed in a few clicks and can be modified at any point. So let's go ahead back in, and now our site has been deployed and we're ready to customize it however we want. We can add content, we can remove content if we don't like a certain row of logic or anything here. It can be taken out. Or we can start to bring in new things. I can bring in a new row to organize content out. I can bring in an application, again, taking content directly from ArcGIS and displaying it here, either in full or as a gallery to bring in these apps and other supporting content. In this case, I'm just going to bring in an iframe, which allows me to bring in any content either internal to ArcGIS or external to ArcGIS. We can bring in a URL, apply, and let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So now we have our dashboard embedded on this web page, really in just a few clicks, and all that's left to do is save our site and publish the draft. Now we also may want to share this organizationally. So we can click on the sharing button, click on organization, and now only people with a login to ArcGIS have the ability to see this, who have been permitted by my organization. So, in our example here, we did share a lot of our survey data out with our entire org, but maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want a subset of employees or workers to see that data. And that's why I like ArcGIS Hub, is because it can compartmentalize data very, very well. You can have the public seeing one page, but if you're logged in, you see additional pages. And if you're part of certain groups, you then see even further down the line of content. So a really great way of structuring this all out. And again, we're going to say it one last time here. We wrote zero code to create all of this content. So I'll turn it back to Esty.
Okay, I love that, zero code. I did take some coding in school, but I wasn't very good at it. So this suits me very well. Well, I said in the beginning, and I hope that you really see it now, that this combination of Survey 123 for your data collection, combined with real-time situational awareness using ArcGIS dashboards, exposed to stakeholders and communities on ArcGIS Hub, is just super powerful. And we see this repeated over and over again. So we thought it would be helpful to you to be able to dive in and learn this WebGIS pattern of use, starting with just these three tools so that you can use it again and again for various goals and initiatives. It's kind of, I like to think of it as an 80-20 rule, right? You get 80% of the value by learning three easy tools. That's a big win. Now, to help spur your imagination on how you can use it, I wanted to share just a few examples with you. One of our favorites actually comes from Carleton County, Minnesota, who used these three tools to support their mobile vaccination clinic. They launched the workflow for delivering flu vaccine. Actually, it was kind of certainly a useful initiative, but also a practice run because they were seeing how this was going to work for COVID-19 vaccines. And they realized more than a fourfold increase in the number of vaccines that they could deliver using these tools for outreach, so hub, pre-registration, consent, satisfaction, and monitoring with dashboards. The other ones were with Survey 123, but all included on the hub. But actually, they're not alone. They're a great example, but we've seen this pattern emerge for performing contact tracing, for modernizing the homeless point-in-time count, for combating opioid misuse, for doing vector-borne disease surveillance and control work, for performing restaurant inspections and achieving the overarching goals to understand and mitigate the impacts of the social determinants of health. In other words, the possibilities for these WebGIS tools are truly endless. So how can you learn more and start to put these tools into practice for your own organization? Well, we have several resources to help you out, and we've collected the ones that we think are quickest to success, highest value, most relevant for you. So for dashboards, we have a learning plan, and that's got a couple of short lessons put together so that you can work through them. I've also provided here links to learning pathways for Survey 123 and for ArcGIS Hub. So you can build on skills and learn in just a few short lessons. Now at the bottom, you're also going to see that there is a link to a free trial, a 21-day trial of ArcGIS Online, which has all of these three apps included in case you don't already have the software. So no matter what, you can get started right away. And with that, I want to leave you with our contact information because honestly, we are always really happy to connect with you and help you to get the most out of these tools. So thank you very much for your attention today.